Welcome to this episode of the People First Podcast Corner. On this episode, we are talking to Darren Shan, who is an author of books such as The Demonata and The Saga of Darren Shan. And quite a few of our members have read his books. Welcome to the show, Darren.
Thanks for having me on.
What made you decide to become an author, and was there anyone that inspired you?
My biggest inspiration would be my mum. My mum used to be a primary school teacher, and she actually taught me the first couple of years when I was at school. And she realised very early on in my life that I had this very active imagination, and she was always encouraging me to channel it into storytelling. And so it's something that's been part of my life as far back as I can remember. I was born in London, but I moved back to Ireland when I was 6 years of age. I've lived in Ireland ever since. I'm Irish in all respects, except my accent. My Cockney twang never left me when I moved back here. But even at that age, when I was still living in London, even then I was writing short stories. It was something I always loved doing. And as I got older, that love of storytelling intensified within me. It's just part of my life. If I wasn't getting paid to be an author, it's something I would be doing as a hobby for fun. I'm very, very fortunate. My pastime is also my work. It's just something that I've loved all my life.
Where did the idea of the Demonata come from?
The Demonata, I don't have a favourite series, but that's the one I'm proudest of because it's the one that stretched me the furthest as an author. A lot of it these days, I look back at it and to be honest, I can't remember a lot about it. I wrote the books over the space of several years, but it's a very complex structure of the Demonata. There are three narrators, the storyline moves backwards and forwards in time. When you read the books, they're a very, very straightforward read. I like writing books where the language isn't overly challenging. I always like writing the same way that I talk. I don't look for big, big words if they don't naturally come to me, which is one of the reasons I think my books prove popular with so many different types of readers, because even though they can be big, challenging ideas, the words can be quite simple. But there's a lot of Demonata I've forgotten about. And I look back at the books now and I can't remember where they come from, how the ideas originated. I do know it all started with a poem. There's a poem at the beginning of the first book, which is called Lord Loss.
Oh, I remember him.
Yeah.
Everyone remembers Lord Loss. He's one of my more memorable villains. I wrote this poem about him several years before I had any ideas to write a book about him. I used to write lots of poetry in my teenage years and my early 20s. And one day I found myself writing this poem about this character who just popped into my mind from somewhere. And so I wrote this poem, and for a few years I did nothing with it, but it kept bubbling away at the back of my mind. Normally, when I'd write a poem, I'd forget about it almost instantly. But this poem stayed with me. And occasionally I'd wonder, is there anything more I could maybe do with this character? And one day I was playing around with ideas for a book about werewolves. I wanted to try and write a werewolf book, but covered it from a different angle. I didn't want to write the traditional type of werewolf book. I was thinking, is there something different I can do with werewolves? And I suddenly had this thought. At the back of my head, something spoke to me and said, well, why don't you use this character of Lord Loss and make it a book about demons as well? And that intrigued me. And I went ahead and I planned Lord Loss and I wrote it. And I always planned it to be a one-off book. Lord Loss, when I first wrote it, it was always meant to be a standalone story. But after I'd finished it, I found myself thinking about it. Again, like the poem, I just couldn't escape from it. I just had a feeling there was more here that I had to do with this character. And I started having ideas of other books that involved Lord Loss and different characters. And over the space of a few years, I gradually came up with the framework of what eventually became the Demonata.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Darren.
To be fair, it's much like theatre in a way, if you sort of like creating your own show, because like if you're a character in a show, you can be just sort of like semi-consciously thinking about it, because I've sometimes sort of like woke up in the morning, thought of a scene, then just had to jot it down for like, and then tell them about it 2 or 3 days later.
Yeah, the idea is it's a question everyone always asks, where do the ideas come from? But really, they come from anywhere and everywhere. I had the idea for Cert the Freak when I was sitting in the back seat of a car. Sorry, I was sitting in the front seat of the car. One of my young cousins was asleep in the back seat. I was babysitting him, and my mind was wandering. I hadn't anything to read or anything to distract me. And I came up with the idea for Cert the Freak literally while I was sitting in the car in the space of a few minutes. Other times I might see something and it can spark something inside me. My most recent series was called Archibald Locks. And one day I was walking over a footbridge in London and I saw a young woman coming towards me and she was pulling these strange faces. Her lips were gurning, her nose was twitching. She probably just had an itchy nose. But as I walked past her, I had this thought that came from nowhere. And I thought, well, what if she's not got an itchy nose? What if she's trying to open a door to another dimension? And these facial tics are acting as her key to that door. And
Wow.
by the time I got to the end of that bridge, I didn't know what she was going to find when she crossed universes, but I was damn sure I was going to write this story. I was intrigued, I was pulled in. So sometimes you get something dramatic like that, which will inspire a story. But more often than not, you can be lying in a bath, I can be sitting here at my computer. It's the one thing we can't control as creators. We never know where the ideas are going to come from. And the real trick of being a good author or a good playwright or a good script writer or whatever, it's not having the good ideas. I had great ideas for books when I was 10, 11, 12 years of age. It's training yourself to have the skills to turn those ideas into good stories. When I was 12, I didn't have the writer skills that I do 40 years later. I built those up over a lot of time, over a lot of writing, a lot of hard work. And that's where the real secret of telling a good story lies. It's not in the ideas. I think everyone has cool ideas all the time. It's training yourself to make the most of those ideas. And that's a lot of hard work, writing a lot of bad stories, learning to write good stories, getting gradually better, and just, sort of dedicating yourself to going further with ideas than most people ever do.
How long have you been working as an author?
Well, as I said earlier, it's something that's been part of my life all my life, but it's really from my sort of teenage years that I began really going for it. When I was younger, I had this idea of being an author, but I wasn't putting in the work that you need to put in. So from about the age of 13, 14, I began stretching myself and pushing myself. I'd write stories in my spare time, not just for schoolwork. I'd do them in the holidays or in the weekends, and I'd set out to try and write novels. I wouldn't get very far, but it's all good learning experience. Everything you write is always a good experience. By the time I was sort of 14, 15, 16, I knew this was what I wanted to devote my life to. This was where I wanted to go. I wasn't sure if I'd make a living from it, but if it was something I had to do in my spare time, this was what was going to be my focus for the rest of my life. I went to university after school, and then I had a job for a couple of years after that. And then at the tender age of 23, I decided, right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to set out to write full time. I thought I'll give myself a year. I'll see if I get anywhere. If I don't, I'll go back, get another job for a couple more years and have another crack at it further down the road. I was living with my parents, I was drawing with dole, but I just went for it. And within that first year, I didn't get published, but I did pick up an agent. I got an agent who was interested in my work, who took me on, worked with me, helped me develop. And he remained my agent for more than a quarter of a century. He died a few years ago, unfortunately. But he played a huge part in helping me get onto that track. So so since the age of 23, I've been writing full time. Although it took 4 or 5 years before I actually made any money out of it. I was living on at the will of my mother and father, who were very, very supportive of me and very, very good to me back then.
Hello, Darren. It's Tyler again. So I must confess, I haven't really read any of your books at the moment. But if I was to start reading them, which series would you recommend I read first?
Oh, it really is. There's no simple answer. I've written all different types of books. I'm best known as Darren Shan, who writes for the YA market. But I also write books for adults under the name of Darren Dash. I actually published a few under the name of Darren Shan many years ago. These days I do under the name of Darren Dash. And I've written all types of books. I'm best known for my horror novels, obviously, but I've also written sci-fi and thrillers. I wrote Shakespearean themed comedy. There's all sorts of things I get up to. The usual starting point for my work is Cert the Freak. That was the first book I published 26 years ago now. Last year was the 25th anniversary of it. And that's the book that changed my life. That was the idea I came up with one day when I was sitting in the car with my sleeping cousin in the back. And back then I was an unknown author for adults, and I hadn't sold anything yet. So I wasn't making any money, and that book changed my life. It sort of turned me around, and it was a very, very fortunate thing to drop into my world. And that's my most popular book. It wasn't a bestseller when it first came out, but over the years it's grown and grown, and word of mouth spread about it. And that's where most of my readers start. Others would go on, the Demon Arthur might be their favourite, or Zombie, or Archibald Locks. But Search Freak and the Saga of Darren Shan is the first book of a series called the Saga of Darren Shan. Is the usual starting point for most of my readers. But I never push that as a starting point. I always say to anyone who's interested in my books, have a little look at my website. Go with whatever grabs your fancy. If you want real hardcore horror, Demon Arthur or Zombie might be more up your street. If you want pure escapism, maybe Archibald Locks. But Search Freak tends to be where the vast majority of my fans start.
Okay, thank you, Darren.
Because I'm thinking I'm just about to start that zombie series actually myself. I'm just about to finish one probably tonight or tomorrow and start that. So
Oh, I hope you enjoy it. It's an odd one, Zombie. It's not as well liked as Saga of Darren Shan or Demon Arthur, because on the one hand, it is this big zombie apocalypse story, but it's also a look at what's been happening politically in the world over the last couple of decades or so. It's about the rise of the far right, about the abuse of power by the powerful, about racism. So there's a lot of meatier stuff in there going on. So it's an odd mix of over-the-top zombie gore and these very pointed political things. So if you enjoy it.
sounds interesting.
What advice would you think is important for new writers here?
The key bit of advice I always give young authors, or older budding authors as well, is write. There is no magic involved with being a writer. It's about the hard work. The more you put in, the more you will get out. I always say, it's great to have an active imagination. It's great to have lots of ideas, but you have to train yourself to take those ideas and run with them. And that comes with hard work. You really do have to put in graft. And if you do that, you will develop, you will improve, you will start to unveil all your talents. And it's the hardest part, because it annoys me sometimes when I'm watching films or TV shows. They present creativity as the muse whispers in your ear and everything is simple from then on. You get an idea for a story and you just knock it out with no problems. The hard part is getting the idea, and it's not. It's all about the work, the hard graft, the grappling with ideas that sometimes they seem beyond your grasp. With the Demon Arthur, there was lots of times when I was writing those books when I thought, can't make this work. I can't do it. It's beyond me. But I kept pushing myself. I kept trying and working and chipping away at it. And if you do that, you'll be astonished at what you can uncover within yourself. It's a bit like a sculptor taking a big block of stone and chipping away at it slowly, slowly, slowly to bring out the form within. And being able to see the form within is one thing, but being prepared to do the hard work of exposing it and bringing it to life, that's something else entirely, and you've got to put in the hard work. So that's one thing I say to every writer starting out: be prepared to put in the hard work. Without that, you will not make most of your abilities.
How many people have you actually worked with?
In terms of writing, I write by myself. The only time I've collaborated is actually on a picture book I released last year. I released my first ever picture book called The Terrified Troll, although it's only come out so far as a limited edition. It hasn't been generally released yet. I hope to do that, either later this year or beyond. But usually I write by myself. I don't write with anyone else. Most writers do work in that way of novels. Now, having said that, a lot of people are involved with every book that I produce. So my agent will always read the book. Then my editor and my publisher. There will be copy editors and proofreaders. So there will be a number of different people who will get involved at different stages of it. But the vast majority of the work I do by myself. It's both the best thing and the worst thing about being a writer. It's the best thing because you are the controller of all that you do. It's not like if you work on a film or a TV show, you're constrained by a budget. There's only so much. If you want to do a big effects heavy show and you've only got a few £100,000 to make it with, you're going to be very limited in what you can do. As a writer, if you're working with actors, you're limited to how they can bring your words to life. But as an author, there are no limits except your own limits. And so it's wonderful to have that amazing, almost godlike power over your stories. The downside of it is you do work in solitude. This is my office I'm talking to you from today, and I spend most of my working day, pretty much all my working days, in here, in this room, shut off from the world. It's quite a lonely career. You've got to be fairly introspective, I think, to really excel at being a writer, because you don't get the interplay that you get working in most jobs with seeing other people a lot of time. I can go months on end, sometimes years on end, without sort of talking to my agent or editor about a story. I work away at it by myself. I spend all these months and sometimes years developing it before I'm ready to share it and take it to them and see what they think of it. And so that can be quite hard and isolating. But I've been doing it now for more than 30 years. So the pros definitely outweigh the cons for me. And I always think it's worth saying to younger writers, it can be lonely work. You've got to be sure that it's the right thing for you to do, because you do sort of cut, especially depending on the type of work you're doing. If you're doing something like screenplays or theatre shows, that might be different. But if you want to write novels, short stories, you do really have to sort of cut yourself off from the world when you're writing and just sort of work in this little bubble with your own making.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, because in theatre you can sort of like just share ideas, combine them together, that sort of thing. So you could, for example, one group sort of like think up an old house, another group sort of like.
Which of your books would you like to be turned into a film or a TV series?
Freak actually was turned into a film, quite a few years ago now. I think it was 2009, if my memory serves me right. It was a big Hollywood production. Universal Studios made it. So they had John C. Reilly, Selma Hayek, Willem Dafoe, and lots of others in the cast. It didn't do very well at the box office. They changed it a lot for my books, which I think was an error. They learned to their cost. It's quite good. I enjoy it. It's quite a fun film. It's very different to my work. I had nothing to do with the making of it, but I do enjoy it on its own terms. There's actually a team working on trying to reboot it at the moment as a TV series. And there's also another team working on my Demonata books, trying to turn those into a TV series as well. So the two are sort of having a race at the moment to see if either can get past the finishing line, and if so, who can do it first. I'd love to see anything adapted online, but I must admit, I would really love to see a Demonata TV series. Those books are so gory and they really push the envelope of what you can do with horror for children and teenagers. And I'd just love to see how that would work in the TV world.
Yeah, that'd be good to watch.
Yeah, there are so many bizarre demons and monstrous creations in it. I just think visually it would be a real interesting show. But listen, I'll take anything. If they do a series of the zombie wasn't product they were trying to do zombie, a different team for several years ago. That got quite far along, but then ultimately we just couldn't get the money in place to make it happen, and that fell to the wayside. So I'd love to see anything of mine adapted. I always think writers have different opinions. Some writers hate their works to be adapted. They see them as detracting from the works if they're done badly. But I always think it's great publicity for the books. A TV show or a movie, it reaches a far wider audience than most books ever reach. And it makes people aware of your work. So even though the Certain Freak movie, whatever it was, 15, 16 years ago, wasn't hugely successful, it brought a lot of new readers into my world. People who had never heard about my books, who read them for the first time on the back of seeing the film. And it brought me a whole new audience. So I'm always happy for any of my works to be adapted. The team working with Demonata have closely involved me. I've been working on the scripts with them. So if that does ever get the go-ahead, I will be very closely involved with it, hopefully, and we'll try to do our best to make it as faithful to the books as possible. I'm not really that closely involved with Certain Freak, but I'd still like to see it happen if it does happen. But if I had a dream wish and I could make it come real and pick which one it was that would get the green light first, I must admit, I don't have any favourites. part of me is itching to see the Demonator up there.
Do you do your books in large print?
Large print, but some of them have been done in large print. Certain Freak was, and I definitely know Certain Freak was years ago. I think maybe a couple of other books in that series were done in large print, but I don't think most of them have been done in large print. There have been audio books of Certain Freak. There was a Braille version of Certain Freak actually many years ago was produced. Again, they might have done another one or two of that. I'm not sure, but obviously, if in fact people read a Kindle these days, they can make the print as large as they want. But in terms of actually printed books, I definitely know Certain Freak, maybe Lord Lost. I'm not 100% certain. I've been very, very lucky. I've published like more than 60 books, and they've been published in lots of different countries around the world. But which is absolutely wonderful. But it does mean I do lose track at times of of all the different formats and what they come out of, whether they're paperbacks or hardbacks, with size and so on. But I definitely do remember Certain Freak at least was very large print, yes.
Do you read your own audiobooks? Because if not, I think you should, because you definitely have the voice for it.
Oh, thank you, Tyler. You're flattering me. A lot of people have said that over the years, but no, I don't actually think my voice is strong enough to do a full book. I'm fine when I do little events or I'm chatting in interviews like this, but if I was focusing the words and reading out loud, I'd stumble quite a bit. I've got a little bit of a stutter that comes through when I read, and I'm not very good at doing different voices and stuff. I think actors are far better placed to do good audio books. So I always love it when people say that to me, but no, I'm not confident enough to do it. I've always meant to try one of the short ones just to see what it would be like, because a lot of my books sadly aren't available in audio. All the Certain Freak books are, the 12 books of the saga of Darren Shan, but Demonator isn't available in audio. I've been trying to get my publishers for years, decades, to try and do Demonator as audio. They did the first 6 a long time ago, only on audio CD. It's never been available to stream or anything like that. But yeah, they just won't do it. I don't know why. So I've kept meaning to try it one day just to see what I would be like, but I'm not confident that I would do a good enough job.
Well, I still think it's time for you to try it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tyler.
Do you have any other upcoming books?
Currently at work on editing my next book for adults, which I will release under the name of Darren Dash, and that will hopefully see print later this year. As I said, right for adults is Darren Dash, and for younger readers as Darren Shan. So that's the next book that I will be working on. I don't have a Darren Shan book lined up at the moment. There's a few different things I've been working on over the last few years, but I haven't had something yet that's compelled me to forge ahead of it. So things are a bit quiet on the Darren Shan front at the moment, but on the Darren Dash front, there will be a new book coming out, as I say, hopefully later this year.
Well, thank you.
When you were a young child, what did you tell your stories to people verbally or
Just write them down.
just write them down?
Usually, now I think pretty much all the time it was writing them down. My brain works differently when going through my fingers than it does through my voice. I used to tell short stories to my cousins. I've got an aunt who's got 5 cousins, and when they were young, I used to babysit them, and I used to sometimes make stories up and tell them to those. But for the vast majority of the time, when I was a child writing that, and then as a teenager, I would write stories down and then read them out. I just found I could be more loquacious when I was writing than I was when I was talking. I'd stumble over my own tongue sometimes. I always remember when I was a teenager, one day I was chatting about being a writer with one of my friends, and he said, "Well, what makes you think you can be a good writer?" And I said, "Oh, I've got a really good, I couldn't think of the word for ages." And then eventually it came to me, "Oh yes, a really good vocabulary." So when I write, I do have a very good vocabulary, but when I talk, the stories, I don't think I could write. I don't think I could relate a story as well verbally as I can when I write it down.
How much costs by book?
It depends on each book, on the length of it, the format, whether it's hardback or paperback. I know Certain Freak came out, all those books originally came out in paperback. When I first got published, it was just in paperbacks. And then with Demonator and later series, they came out as hardbacks. I think the hardbacks maybe £13, £14, maybe a bit more these days. Paperback's about £6, £7, something like that, which is really good value. If you consider the cost of going to the theatre these days, or even going to the cinema, I think a book is really, really good value. But I do know the Darren Dash books I self-publish, and I keep those costs even lower. So if I'm doing the ebooks of those, I keep those down usually to about £3 or £4. I try and make the works as affordable as I possibly can. So most of my books you can pick up fairly cheaply. If you look at online, for instance, you can get all 12 of the Cert Freak books, the Saga Darren Shan, I think for less than £20 if you look around this. And they're official versions. It's a really lovely case version of them. But they're available at a really, really good price. So I know it's been hard for me. People who've been following me for like 25 years and have bought each book new, they'll have spent a small fortune on me, unfortunately. But these days, if you go back, you can find my sets at pretty good prices. So you can actually get up to date with me without breaking the bank.
We'd like to say a big thank you to you, Darren, for coming on the show today, and we wish you all the best for your future work. And we always publish our podcast, so we will email you and tell you when it's out. But we'd love to talk to you again one day, and a big thank you for coming.
So much. Once again, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been a really enjoyable interview. It's flown by for me. I hope it has for you as well. I think that's always a sign of a good interview when the time goes by so quickly.
Exactly.
We've prepared well. When we get someone on we really know, we're excited, and that's what makes it fly by, I think.
Same.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Brill.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Goodbye, Darren.
Yeah.
Bye.
See you soon.
Cheers. Watch out for demons out there.
Oh, Maud Moss. Maud Moss.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Bye.
Bye.